Fire King Tier 0, baby. Let's go! If you're at locals and you've been losing to Fire Kings quite a good bit, I want to run through some helpful tips, things that you can do to help get you back to getting some dubs, take them out of the game, because you're going to start seeing a lot more people play this deck that don't necessarily know how it works, aren't very good at it, but want to give it a shot because it is Tier 0. So, that being said, let's go ahead and walk through some common counters to Fire Kings from best to worst. No, worst to best. One of those two. They're coming in at number 5, we've got Dimension Shifter. Absolutely fantastic card for shutting down the deck. A lot of people will claim that Fire Kings can play under Dimension Shifter. They're wrong. Or they're very skilled. One of the two. Most people picking this deck up that are going to be stealing some wins with it are not going to know how to play under Dimension Shifter. For those of you that don't know, Dimension Shifter is a hand trap or a card that can be activated in the hand, discarded, sent to the graveyard, and for the next 2 turns, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. Fire King needs their graveyard. There's constantly things that are destroying cards from the deck, field, or hand and sitting to the graveyard that are then used as resources. So not having their graveyard is a big blow to the deck and honestly prohibits it from running as intended. With the Snake Eye stuff, obviously there's not a lot you can do there. They are able to put things in kind of a protective spot by putting them in their back row. However, they're in a much better spot if they're having to rely solely on the Snake Eye engine, because the Fire King engine is a lot of what is very explosive about the deck. The main drawback with Dimension Shifter is it's a 2-sided dagger. So when you are using Dimension Shifter, you're also crippling yourself from the next turn unless your deck either doesn't rely on your graveyard or can make use of things that are banished. If they can't, you're kind of SOL at this point. Also, the biggest problem to Dimension Shifter and any of the other monster hand traps we're going to talk about in this list is that Called by the Grave and Crossout Designator are being used. Not only can these be fantastic defensive options, but also Called by, of course, can be a little bit offensive, disrupt you, blah 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 blah. It's the bane of hand traps, and as people are becoming more and more wary of things like D-Shifter, expect to see Crossout used a little bit more. You can run 3 of those, 1 D-Shifter, and be good to go. 4th place was a bit of a toss-up. I wasn't sure if I was going to put this card or what's going to be next, but I want to go ahead and mention Ash Blossom. Now, Ash Blossom can be very impactful against Fire Kings. The problem is, as they're link climbing later in kind of their combo, their turn, Ash Blossom becomes a liability because they're able to bring it back with Hida, and that becomes a whole thing. Now, if you Ash Blossom them, depending on their hand, if they're relying on normal summon Ponix or normal summon Ash, you've got a really good chance of hard stopping their turn. They do have 4 other cards though, so it can be a little bit dicey, but it's a great utility card. You can use that any search they do, any destruction they do from the deck, anything like that. It's a very good card to have kind of in your back pocket. And if you know how they're playing, if you have any hand knowledge, if you have any play knowledge, deck knowledge, whatever it might be, you've got a really good chance of stopping them at that crucial combo point. If you are able to Ash their Ponix, that's all they've got, you're off to the races. You can OTK them next turn. That's not a problem. The hardest thing you're going to run into is that 1, like I said, you can recapture it. 2, obviously Crossout is going to be run in a lot of Fire King decks right now, and Ash Blossom is a go-to hand trap for them because it is a fire. And 3, they can use it as link material, use it climbing from Hida, all that kind of good stuff. So there are some drawbacks to it, but it is an excellent card. Number 3, and the last of the hand traps, is Droll and Lockbird. Droll is a pretty much universally good card in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Send it from your hand after your opponent searches once. They can't search anymore for the rest of the turn. It is not a fire type, so they can't use it with Hida, which is why I kind of ranked it a little bit higher than Ash, and it does shut down the Fire King deck for the most part. The main problem is that Fire King has a lot of extension material. Now, you are effectively stopping Fire King Island's effect as long as they can't somehow destroy their copy of Ponix, get nothing on the field, and use something like Onslaught or use a secondary effect of Fire King Island as summon from hand, which is possible, but unlikely. At this point, you're probably hard stopping their combo pieces. They'll do whatever they can, run out of resources from the hand, and have to go ahead and pass to you. There will be times when your lack of hand knowledge is really going to stop you if they have extension pieces in the hand and they're able to keep playing. Obviously, Droll's not going to help you much there, but in general, Droll is going to stop their combo pieces very easily and prevent them from setting up from wiping your board on your turn, which is one of the scariest things that Fire Kings can do, as well as their tons and tons of recursion, which you're going to see quite a good bit of. Droll can really stop that in its place, provided they don't have something like cross out designator and called by the grave, which if they are worried about it, they will run, especially considering how accessible Droll is for Fire Kings with it being included in their structure deck. So that's going to wrap up all of the monsters. At number 2, we're actually going to switch over to some trap cards that are very good against it, and this one is not surprising in the slightest. It's evenly matched. Flipping it evenly against Fire King after they've blown up your board, or if you're going second, running it at the end of the battle phase as your first move on your turn, is going to effectively stop Fire Kings in its tracks. There's not a lot it can play around it. First off, its monsters need to be destroyed and not banished. Second, you're going to remove that field spell, so their board is going to get wiped, and they likely won't have a way to capitalize off of that wipe in an effective manner. Partially because if they try and save Fire King Island to prevent their board from being wiped, everything's getting banished. If Fire King Island does trigger, there's not a great thing to have on board to help save that. There is nothing that's going to be a real threat to you, other than, of course, whatever else is in their hand, which you have no control over and have to just continue playing around. But combined with some other hand traps you might have in your hand going second, you're actually going to be in a pretty good spot. I want to talk real quick about some honorable mentions. Those are going to be Necro Valley and Macrocosmos. Both of them are very strong going up against Fire Kings, but considering they are lingering continuous effects, can really burn you out later in the duel, as pretty much every archetype nowadays is going to rely on the graveyard. Necro Valley, of course, is going to prevent anything from moving out of the grave once it is in the grave, and then Macrocosmos is going to banish anything that would be sent to the grave, both of which, like I mentioned, are very good against Fire Kings, but are a little bit slow, especially in the case of Macrocosmos, and can really end up biting you depending on what you've got going on. In our number 1 spot, we have one that I think is going to surprise a lot of people. I actually saw a little bit of debate around this, but I promise I think this is the best thing to use against Fire Kings, and that's Ice Dragon's Prison. This card is incredible if you know what Fire Kings are doing. I'm going to show you exactly why, when to use that card, and what to do. I promise if you do this, you will shut down the Fire King primary combo line. Without the use of any other hand traps or negations, you can effectively stop Fire Kings from playing very easily, and I'll show you why right here. So this is the primary Fire King combo line. First thing you're going to do, obviously, you're going to normal summon Ponix. Ponix is your searcher. It is the best normal summon in the deck. You're going to do that. You're going to go ahead and search with Ponix, and 99 times out of 100 even, you're going to search your copy of Fire King Sanctuary. Fire King Sanctuary is the one that lets you Xyz on your opponent's turn. It also searches and places Fire King Island. Fire King Island is the field spell. It's also one of the crucial pieces of the deck. When Fire King Island is activated, you can destroy your copy of Ponix. This is what people usually do to keep Ponix off of the board. When that is done, they will 99 times out of 100 search the copy of Sacred Fire King Garunix, use its effect to special summon itself, and activate its effect on summon. And this is the key point you're going to hit. I'll show you why. They're going to go ahead and destroy Barong, and if they have no other extenders, they have nothing in their hand they can make use of, they're going to go ahead and pass right here. And this is the typical Fire King inboard. This is the bread and butter combo of the deck. Right here is actually a really good spot for you to be. See, what they're relying on is at the beginning of your next turn during your standby phase, they can search with Barong, they can use Ponix to return itself back to hand, but this is actually where we're going to hit them. So on the summon of Sacred Fire King Garunix that we spoke about earlier, before they even destroy their copy of Barong, we're going to go ahead and flip Ice Dragon's Prison. What this is going to do is it's going to allow us to special summon Ponix back to our field and then banish both of these. So no matter what they do, they have an empty board. What they can do, of course, is use the effect of Sacred Fire King Garunix to destroy something from deck. They might go ahead and destroy their copy of Barong because that is a free search. They might go ahead and destroy their copy of Kirin. I don't know why they would do that, but sometimes when people are emotional, I have seen this happen quite a lot in my playtesting. The problem is, this gives them no recursion next turn. It leaves them with an empty board. There's nothing they can search with Barong that's really going to allow them to capitalize off of its search effect. They can search out another copy of Garunix that can't summon itself. They can summon out a copy of, or add to their hand, excuse me, they can add a copy of Kirin that might be able to special summon itself, but at that point, it's just a 2400 attack stat body on the field. It's not much of a threat. They've really got no Fire King extenders to search for at this point. This is a very, very, very good tech card. I highly recommend going ahead and picking up 3 copies of Ice Dragon's Prison in this format. It's also just a good staple card to have if you know your opponent's deck, but it does require a good bit of deck knowledge. That's a really scary thing that a lot of people aren't really sure about, but it can be very, very useful going forward. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this a little bit informative. I apologize if I rambled in a couple places, but hopefully when you're seeing this, you can help take some dubs at locals. And like I always say here on the channel, what I remember to, I hope to see you around sometime.